In climate, we're incredibly fortunate because we've been very systematic about assembling the overall perspectives of the scientific community. Within the last year, there have been highly organized, systematic reviews of what we know and what we don't know from the American Association for the Advancement of Science, it's the biggest science society in the US, the Royal Society in Britain, the main scientific organization of science excellence in the UK, and the National Academy of Sciences in the US, the leading scientific body in the US, all finding essentially the same thing. And in addition to that, we've seen major assessments from something called the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, something that I've been privileged to work with for the last dozen years. And I want to say just a couple of things about the way the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, works. The IPCC is governmental, intergovernmental, and essentially, 25 years ago, the world's governments came to the scientific community and they said, hey, you scientific community, if you'll follow our rules about doing systematic assessments, we'll consider them the definitive statement of what we know and what we don't know about climate science. And the rules are complicated. They involve efforts to do absolutely comprehensive reviews, to identify author teams from around the world, to go through multiple rounds of independently monitored reviews for the report that we just completed. We had over 50,000 review comments from around the world. Every one of those review comments had to be individually responded to with a separate group of scientists evaluating whether the responses were appropriate. And the process proceeds such that by the time the assessment's done, it's really a product of the entire scientific community. It's not me writing as a scientist or Marion writing as a scientist. It's the scientific community's statement. And then we get to the final approval. The document is approved word by word, by consensus, by all the world's governments. Think about what that means. We're in the plenary approval session for the Working Group 2 report, and I put the first sentence up on the whiteboard and says, changes in the climate system are unequivocal. I say, does anyone agree, or does everyone agree, does anyone not agree that that sentence represents an accurate statement of where we are with the science? You're Kuwait, you're Tuvalu, and you're India, and when I first put the statement up, probably 50 countries would say they're not convinced. And we don't move on until every country is convinced that that is the definitive statement of what we know and what we don't know. It's an amazing process. When you think about it, you could easily imagine that we would never get beyond a one-line summary. But in fact, we do, because the science really is so robustly assembled that it's essentially bulletproof.